She said I was confused, then patted my shoulder, while wearing my dead husband's necklace. My cheeks burned, but my voice cracked louder than the dryer behind us. And just outside, my siblings were laughing, listening. That's when I knew. It wasn't just theft, it was humiliation, planned. She'd pawned the original, worn a fake, and turned my grief into a punchline. But she forgot one thing. I kept every receipt, every photo, every date. My daughter saw the truth. And now I was going to show everyone else, starting with that necklace. My name is Melissa Carter, and I'm 45 years old. Most days follow a steady rhythm, teaching high school English, helping my 9-year-old daughter Lily with homework, and touching the velvet box where I keep my late husband Mark's gold necklace. The scent of rosemary from our simple dinners mingles with steam from endless loads of laundry. My mother Evelyn, always quick with criticism, spent years undermining Mark's choices, calling him unambitious while ranking my siblings' achievements like some twisted competition. But she doesn't know about the dated photos, appraisal documents, and detailed records I've kept hidden beneath that velvet, each piece carefully preserved, just like Mark's memory. Our next family reunion looms, where Mother's laughter cuts sharper than her words. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled into Mother's driveway for our annual family reunion, gripping the steering wheel a moment longer than necessary. You know that feeling when your stomach drops before walking into a room full of judgment? That's what these reunions had become since Mark passed. "Come on, Mom," Lily chirped from the back seat, already unbuckling. "I can smell Grandma's potato salad." The late June heat shimmed off the pavement as we made our way around to the backyard. Mother's garden was perfect as always, not a hosta leaf out of place. Citronella candles hissed their futile warning to mosquitoes, and the picnic tables sagged under the weight of covered dishes. I could practically taste the familiar mix of deviled eggs and disappointment. Mother stood at the buffet table like a conductor before her orchestra, directing traffic with a serving spoon. "Nancy, dear, you simply must try the bean salad. It's Margaret's new recipe." Her voice carried that artificial sweetness that always set my teeth on edge. "Melissa, you made it." My sister Jennifer waved from the drinks table, but her eyes did that quick up and down they always do, probably checking if I'd finally pulled myself together after Mark. I managed a wave back while balancing the brownies I'd brought. Remember when these gatherings used to feel like actual family time? Back when Dad was alive, before Mother turned everything into a competition? Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Can I go play with Sarah and Emma?" "Of course, sweetie. Just stay where I can see you." I watched her skip off toward her cousins by the swing set, her yellow sundress catching the breeze. I found a spot at one of the picnic tables, trying to look busy, arranging napkins while avoiding Mother's attention. The ice clinked in plastic cups, and someone's radio played old country songs from the porch. Everything felt normal enough until Lily appeared beside me, face serious. She glanced around like we were spies exchanging secrets, then slipped something under the table. My fingers found the folded paper, and I opened it carefully in my lap. There, in purple marker, in my daughter's careful third-grade handwriting, "Grandma has Mommy's necklace." The potato salad turned to cement in my stomach. Mother's laugh cut through the afternoon air just then, that practiced, theatrical sound she uses when she's holding court. And there it was, catching the sun at her throat, a glint of gold that shouldn't have been there. I touched my own neck reflexively, feeling the phantom weight of Mark's gift. The chain had been exactly the right length, falling just so. The pendant had that specific warm tone. He'd picked because it matches your eyes when you smile, Mel. I'd memorized every detail during those long nights after he died, when holding it was the only thing that helped me sleep. Was I seeing things? Grief plays tricks sometimes. God knows I'd learned that lesson. Maybe Lily was mistaken. Kids notice jewelry, sure, but they don't understand value or meaning. It couldn't be the same piece. It couldn't, but my feet were already moving, toward the patio, heart hammering against my ribs. Cousin Alice and her husband quickly looked away as I passed, pretending they hadn't been watching. I could feel the weight of eyes on my back, the silent questions. I forced my face into what I hoped was a neutral expression. The closer I got to Mother, the clearer the necklace became. That distinctive curve of the pendant, the slightly asymmetrical link pattern in the chain that the jeweler had said made it unique. Even the way it caught the light was familiar, too familiar to be coincidence. I gestured toward the house, keeping my voice steady. "Mother, could I have a word?" She tilted her head, that familiar calculating look crossing her face. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right?" We stepped inside, the screen door snapping shut behind us. The laundry room seemed like the best spot, private enough but close enough that I could still keep an eye on Lily through the window. The dryer was running, filling the small space with humid air that smelled of Mother's expensive lemon detergent. You know that sharp, artificial citrus smell that tries too hard to seem natural? That was Mother all over. "It's about the necklace you're wearing," I said, watching her face carefully. Lily noticed it. Mother's hand went to her throat, touching the gold chain with practiced delicacy. "Oh, this old thing? What about it?" "That's Mark's necklace, the one he gave me for our 10th anniversary. My voice caught slightly on his name, the one I kept in the velvet box. The smile she gave me, I swear, it could have frozen hell over. "Melissa, sweetheart, grief does such strange things to memory, doesn't it? You know how unreliable our minds can be when we're struggling." I heard the laundry room door creak. Miranda and Joel were hovering just outside, pretending to mix drinks at the nearby wet bar. They weren't even trying to hide their eavesdropping. "I'm not confused, Mother. That necklace has Mark's initials engraved on the back of the pendant. I have the original appraisal in the box. I can show you—" Miranda's snort cut through the dryer's rumble. Behind her, Joel muttered something about me being dramatic again. The heat rose in my cheeks, that horrible flush. That always gives away my emotions. Mother reached out and patted my shoulder like I was 8 years old with a scraped knee. "Darling, you've been under so much stress lately. Teaching full-time, raising Lily alone." She sighed that martyred sigh she'd perfected over the years. "Perhaps you've misplaced the necklace? You know how things get lost in big houses. My apartment is 900 square feet. "It's not lost," I insisted, hating how my voice had started to waver. "It was in the velvet box in my jewelry case, the same place I've kept it since—" I stopped, swallowed hard. "Since Mark died." Mother just shrugged, already turning toward the door. "Well, I'm sure it'll turn up eventually. These things usually do." She brushed past Miranda and Joel, dismissing the entire conversation like lint from her sleeve. I stood there in the steamy laundry room, that lemon smell suddenly nauseating. Through the window, I could see Lily on the swings, her legs pumping against the summer sky. She looked so much like Mark sometimes it hurt. My siblings were still lingering, not even bothering to hide their smirks now. Miranda raised her eyebrows at Joel, that silent sibling communication that always left me on the outside. I walked out past them, head high despite the burning in my cheeks. The note from Lily crinkled in my pocket with each step. From the patio, I could hear Mother's laugh again, probably holding court with the cousins, probably already spinning this into another story about poor, unstable Melissa. "Lily," I called out, trying to keep my voice normal. "Time to go, honey." She hopped off the swing and came running, somehow knowing not to argue. My smart girl, she always could read a room better than most adults. I took her small hand in mine as we headed for the car. The sun was getting low, sliding toward the perfectly trimmed hedges that bordered Mother's yard. Behind us, laughter rippled across the lawn, and I couldn't tell anymore if it was directed at us or not. Maybe that was worse. I got home and made straight for the kettle, my hands shaking so bad I had to focus just to fill it. You know those moments when you're praying you're wrong, but deep down you already know you're right? That's where I was at. While the water heated, I headed to the linen closet, second shelf from the top, behind the guest towels. The velvet box had sat there since money got tight after Mark died. I'd figured it was safer than wearing something that valuable while grading papers and cooking dinner. The box was exactly where I'd left it, but when I opened it, empty. just the soft navy velvet with its perfect impression where the necklace used to rest. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay methodical. Mark always said I had a mind like a filing cabinet, everything labeled, everything in its place. Time to put that to use. I grabbed my reading glasses from the kitchen counter just as the kettle started to whistle. Made my tea on autopilot while pulling out the manila envelope I kept with the box. Inside was the appraisal, crisp and official despite being folded all these years. And there, it was in black and white. 18K gold pendant and chain, custom engraving, MC plus MM, estimated value. Next came the photos. Our 10th anniversary dinner, Mark fastening the necklace while I smiled at the camera. You can see the engraving clear as day in that shot, the way he'd made sure to capture it. The timestamp in the corner read 6/15/2018. God, his hands looked so strong and steady in that picture. I settled at the kitchen table with my tea, spreading everything out like I was planning a lesson. The old receipt from the jeweler, calendar screenshots from my phone showing when I'd last worn it to school events, text messages discussing the necklace with my sister, all meticulously saved because that's just how I am. Started making a timeline on my notepad, working backward from today. Last time I definitely had it. First time I noticed it missing. Every visit from Mother in Mayoam between. The pattern emerged like one of those hidden picture puzzles. You can't see it at first, then suddenly it's obvious. Mother had been so helpful after Mark died. Always dropping by with casseroles, offering to organize things, insisting on cleaning while I was at work. Said she couldn't bear to see me struggling alone. The visits tracked perfectly with the gap in my timeline. My tea went cold while I worked. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight. But I kept writing, kept connecting dots. Making accusations without proof would just feed right into her story about my unstable grief. No, I needed evidence. Real, solid evidence that even Miranda and Joel couldn't dismiss. I opened my laptop and started mapping pawn shops near Mother's regular haunts, her hair salon, her volunteer shifts at the hospital thrift store, her weekly bridge club. Added a few higher-end consignment, boutiques too, the kind that might handle estate jewelry. She wouldn't have risked somewhere too obvious. The plan came together like a lesson outline. Coffee at 6 tomorrow morning. Start calling shops when they open at 7, acting like a worried daughter whose elderly mother might have accidentally sold a family heirloom. Visit the most likely places by 9, bringing the appraisal and anniversary photo. I closed the notebook and leaned back, listening to the quiet house. Down the hall, I could hear Lily's soft breathing through her open door. She'd been so brave today, slipping me that note. So much like her father, seeing the truth and facing it head on. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above me, stirring the warm summer air. Somewhere in this city, Mark's necklace was waiting to be found, and I was going to find it. By the 4th pawn shop, I had my story down pat. My elderly mother might have brought in a gold necklace by mistake. Always the same response. Sympathetic headshakes, promises to keep an eye out. The boutiques were worse, all raised eyebrows and subtle suggestions that perhaps I was confused. I was starting to hate that word. Confused. Like I couldn't tell the difference between the necklace I'd worn for years and empty air. You ever notice how people treat you like you're losing it when they don't want to help? They get this tone, all sugar-coated concern, while their eyes slide away. My phone buzzed during lunch break at school. Miranda's text lit up the screen. Mom's redoing her will. This drama won't help your case. I nearly dropped my sandwich. Should have known Mother would play this card. She'd always wielded inheritance like a conductor's baton, directing us through her favorite symphony of family politics. I could hear, her voice clear as a bell. If you just let go of old grudges, dear. The family email arrived during 6th period. I read it between grammar lessons, trying to keep my face neutral while 30 teenagers dissected sentence structures. Mother had hired some fancy estate planner, everything getting properly organized, her words. But there it was, buried in the 3rd paragraph. Final signing in 2 months. 2 months. The date burned into my Brain like a brand. I wrote it on a post-it and stuck it to my desk calendar, then immediately peeled it off. Couldn't risk questions from colleagues about why I was counting down to August 15th. After school, I stopped at the market. Needed something normal, something routine. Found myself staring at the frozen dinners Mark used to joke about. TV dinner roulette, he'd called it. Never knowing what you'd actually get compared to the box. Picture. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while I tried to calculate how many more shops I could check before the will got signed. At home, I pinned the estate planning email printout to the fridge. Used that old magnet from Pete's Diner, the one with the cartoon coffee cup Mark had brought home one Sunday morning. "Look what I snagged us," he'd said, so proud of this silly little thing. The paper hung there like a countdown clock, each day ticking away another chance to prove I wasn't just some grieving widow making trouble. "Homework time, sweetie," I called to Lily, glad my voice stayed steady. She looked up from her tablet, those knowing eyes so much like her father's. I busied myself with dinner prep, hoping she wouldn't notice my hands trembling as I chopped carrots. That night, sleep played hide and seek. I lay there counting weeks like worry beads. 8 weeks, 56 days. However many hours that made. The ceiling fan clicked with each rotation, like some mocking metronome keeping time while my chances slipped away. Tomorrow had to be different. I needed a new angle, something beyond this endless loop of sorry, can't help you, and pitying looks. Every dead end felt like another brick in Mother's wall of respectability, while I was getting painted as the unstable one, the troublemaker who couldn't accept reality. The guest room clock read 2:17 a.m. when I finally gave up on sleep. Sat at the kitchen table with chamomile tea, watching moonlight creep across Mother's email. 2 months to find proof before she could legally erase any obligation to make things right. 2 months before my siblings got their final excuse to write me off as the family cautionary tale. I touched the diner magnet, its chipped edge familiar under my fingertip. Mark would have known what to do. He always saw the angles I missed, found paths through problems I thought were solid walls. Right now, I needed that kind of clarity more than ever. Tomorrow would be different. It had to be. Either I'd find a real lead, or I'd have to try something completely new, because watching that August deadline march closer while doing the same useless routine, that wasn't an option anymore. Morning coffee's a funny thing. Supposed to wake you up, get you moving. But there I sat at 7 a.m., staring at a stone-cold cup and a list of crossed-out shop names that might as well have been written in invisible ink for all the good they'd done me. You ever have one of those moments where everything you thought was solid just dissolves? The velvet box sat open on the kitchen table, that perfect square impression where Mark's necklace used to rest, looking back at me like an empty picture frame. Mother's voice kept echoing in my head. Unstable, she'd called me. Maybe she was right. Maybe grief had finally cracked something loose in my mind, made me see theft where there was just loss. My phone sat there too, tempting me. One call could end this whole mess. I could apologize, tell Mother I'd been confused, emotional. She'd probably even forgive me, eventually. After enough groveling and public displays of contrition, the bleeding would stop, but the scar would always show. The doorbell startled me so bad I knocked over my coffee cup, thankfully empty, but it clattered across the table like an accusation. Through the front window, I caught sight of a familiar silhouette on my porch, Uncle Robert, my father's older brother. He was standing there in his usual weekend getup, worn denim jacket, that ancient Red Sox cap he'd probably sleep in if his wife let him. When I opened the door, he was turning that cap in his hands like he used to do at family functions when Mother got wound up about something. His eyes met mine, steady, kind, the way they'd been at Dad's funeral when he'd stood quietly by while Mother orchestrated her perfect widow performance. "Morning, Mel," he said, voice gentle as always. "Got time for a talk?" I led him to the kitchen, started fresh coffee more out of habit than hospitality. He settled into Mark's old spot at the table, looked at the velvet box, then back at me. I heard about the reunion, he said. About the necklace. My throat tried to close up. Mother told you I was causing trouble? No. He shook his head slowly. I came because I should have spoken up sooner. Last Christmas, your mother had too much wine at dinner. Started talking when she thought no one was listening. Bragging, really, about how she'd pawned the original years ago. My hand found the doorframe, gripped it hard. The room did a slow spin while my brain tried to process what he'd just said. She was laughing about it, Robert continued, his voice tight. Said she'd found a perfect twin, a replica, that no one would ever know the difference. She seemed proud of how clever she'd been. The coffee maker beeped, making me jump. I stood there, relief and horror tangling up in my chest like fighting snakes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Robert's weathered hands wrapped around the empty cup in front of him. I had no proof, just words spoken in a wine haze, and he looked down. I was afraid. My retirement isn't what it should be. Your mother's been helping. The threat of getting cut off at my age. I understood then. The same fear that had nearly driven me to make that apology call earlier. Mother's financial web trapped us all, one way or another. My hands shook as I poured coffee for us both. But you're here now. I am. He accepted the cup with a nod. Because what she did to you, to Mark's memory, it isn't right. And maybe together we can find a way to prove it. I sank into the chair across from him, mind racing. You really think we can? Pawn shops keep records, he said carefully. Especially for, jewelry. If we can track down where she sold it. He paused, took a sip of coffee. I may not have much money, Mel, but I've got time. And I know how to be patient. Looking at him there, at his steady hands and clear eyes, I saw the first real path forward since this whole nightmare began. Not just wild accusations or desperate searches, but actual strategy. The braid of horror and hope in my chest started to untangle, hope pulling ahead. Uncle Robert's pickup rumbled down Mason Street, past the antique shops where Mother spent her Thursdays hunting treasures. You know the type of places, all pressed tin ceilings and creaky floorboards where everything's either overpriced or suspiciously cheap. The pawn shops started showing up between them like weeds in a garden, their neon signs already glowing in the gray afternoon. She likes this area, Robert said, navigating around a delivery truck. Says it has character. The way he said it, I could hear Mother's exact tone. Funny how family can do that. Mimic the little things that give away what someone really means. I had the appraisal copy and anniversary photo tucked in my purse, protected in a clear sleeve. Mark's initials were clear in the photo. MC in that flowing script he'd chosen. My fingers kept finding the edge of that sleeve, like touching it could, somehow, keep the memory closer. The third shop we tried had one of those old-school bells above the door. Robert held it open for me, and I stepped into air that smelled like furniture polish and old metal. Behind the counter, a clerk who looked about 12, though he had to be at least 20, glanced up from his phone. "Hi there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm hoping you can help me track down some records." He straightened up, probably responding to something in my tone. Or maybe Robert's presence helped. My uncle had that solid, trustworthy look that made people want to cooperate. "What kind of records?" I laid out the photo and appraisal. "This necklace was sold here, I believe, between March and May, 3 years ago." The kid, Tommy, according to his name tag, studied the documents. "That's pretty specific timing." "It was right after my husband died," I said. Quietly, Robert's hand found my shoulder, squeezed gently. Something in Tommy's face shifted. He looked older suddenly, more focused. "Let me check our system." His fingers moved over the keyboard. "We keep pretty careful inventory records. The boss is kind of obsessive about it." While he searched, I watched dust motes dance in the fluorescent light, trying not to count the seconds. Robert wandered over to examine a display of pocket watches, giving me space while staying close. "There might be something," Tommy said finally, "but you'd need to talk to Mr. Grayson. He managed the place back then, kept all the paper records too. He's retired now, but—" "Could you call him?" Robert asked, moving back to the counter. Tommy hesitated, then nodded. He still helps out sometimes with old inventory questions. He picked up the phone, and I held my breath through the conversation. 20 minutes and several calls later, we had a scan coming through their ancient fax machine. The paper was warm when Tommy handed it to me, and my hands shook as I read the faded text. There it was, the date, just 6 weeks after the funeral. The description matched perfectly, right down to those precious initials. My knees went wobbly. Robert guided me to a chair, while Tommy started preparing official copies. "We'll need these notarized," Robert told him, "and a chain of custody statement." I barely registered the paperwork process, my eyes fixed on those initials. Mark's letters, his mark on the world, proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. Tommy brought over a certified appraisal note confirming the engraving style matched our documentation. Outside, the afternoon had turned heavy with coming rain. A bus sighed to a stop at the curb, hydraulics hissing like it shared my relief. Robert helped me organize everything into a fresh plastic sleeve while I tried to find words. "Thank you," I managed finally, "for believing me, for helping." He just nodded, understanding in his eyes. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I typed out the text to Miranda. "I have records I want you to see." The message showed as delivered, but no reply came. The screen stayed stubbornly dark while thunder grumbled overhead. You know that moment when hope feels like a balloon someone's slowly letting the air out of? That was me, sitting in Mabel's coffee shop 3 days after we found the pawn records. The place usually felt cozy, all cinnamon rolls and coffee steam, but today it just felt small. Too small for what I needed to do. Miranda and Joel chose the corner booth, always the power players, even in this. I'd arrived early, set up my laptop, made sure everything was in order. Professional, organized, the way Mother taught us to handle unfortunate situations. "This better be worth missing lunch hour," Miranda said, sliding in first. Her red blazer matched her nails, perfectly manicured as always. Joel followed, his tie already loosened like he was ready to dismiss whatever I had to say. I took a slow breath. "I appreciate you coming." The sleeve felt heavy in my hands as I pulled out the documents. I found proof about Mark's necklace. "Here we go," Joel muttered, but Miranda held up a hand, playing mediator like she used to during childhood fights. "Let's see what you have, Mel." I laid everything out carefully. The pawn ticket first, then the notarized copies, the chain of custody forms, the certified appraisal note, each paper another brick in the wall of truth I'd built. The dates line up exactly with when Mother visited after the funeral. See? And here, I pointed to the description. "These are Mark's initials, the same style from our anniversary photo." Miranda's nails tapped against her untouched coffee cup. The sound matched my pulse, too fast, too sharp. Joel leaned back, arms crossed, looking at the ceiling like he could find answers there. "Anyone can fake paper," he said finally. My stomach dropped. "What? No, look, these are notarized. The retired manager, Mr. Grayson, he remembers. Mom warned us you might do something like this." Miranda's voice had gone soft, disappointed. The way she used to sound when I'd failed at something she'd mastered easily. "She said grief was making you unstable." Unstable? The word tasted like copper. "I'm not. These are real documents. Call the shop. Call Mr. Grayson. The initials match exactly." "Because you knew what they looked like," Joel cut in. "From your precious anniversary photo. How can you think I'd forge? How can you keep attacking Mom like this?" Miranda's jaw tightened, the way it did when she was about to deliver a final judgment. First, the accusations at the reunion. Now fake evidence? "It's not fake," my voice cracked. A few heads turned at nearby tables. I forced myself quieter. "Why would I make this up?" "Because you're not handling Mark's death well," Miranda whispered. "Mom's worried about you. We all are." I started gathering the papers with trembling hands, sliding them back into the sleeve. The truth felt heavy, useless. She stole from me, from Mark's memory, and you're helping her hide it. You need help, Mel. Joel stood up, straightening his tie. Professional help. Miranda reached for my hand. I pulled back. When you're ready to apologize to Mom, we'll be there. Until then. She left the sentence hanging, like my future in the family. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray. Buses moaned past, splashing through puddles that reflected neon coffee signs and my own defeated posture. I wanted to rip open the sleeve, let all that careful evidence scatter across traffic. Let the cars shred truth into confetti. My phone felt like lead as I pulled it out. I typed one word to Robert. Failed. The siblings I'd grown up with, who should have been my shield wall against hurt, had just branded me a forger, a grief-mad widow chasing shadows. Maybe that's what everyone would believe now. The story was certainly neater that way. My phone buzzed. Robert's reply lit up the screen. There's still one move. I stared at those 4 words while another bus rolled past, its brakes squealing like the trapped feeling in my chest. The puddles at my feet showed a woman holding a plastic sleeve full of useless truth, and I'd never felt more alone. Robert's kitchen smelled like coffee and old wood, the kind of honest scent that reminded me of Mark's workshop. I sat at the scratched oak table while Robert lined up fresh legal pads and a mason jar full of black pens. Each one clicked and tested before he set it down. You know what your mother fears most? He settled into the chair across from me, his reading glasses catching the afternoon light. Being seen, really seen, without her careful makeup and rehearsed stories. I traced a finger along the table's worn grain. She's had plenty of practice keeping up appearances. Exactly. Robert tapped one of the pens against the yellow pad, which is why we take this public. Next family reunion, right in her own backyard theater. My stomach nodded. I don't know, Robert. A scene in front of everyone? Privacy's been her shield, Melissa. Every time you tried handling this, quietly, she twisted it, made you look unstable, used those private moments to plant doubt. He leaned forward. But what happens when a professional jeweler examines that replica around her neck, with 30 pairs of eyes watching? I pictured Evelyn's face, that mask she wore like armor, finally cracking under proper light. She'll try to leave, make excuses. Not if we time it right. Get the jeweler there early, like he's a guest. Have the documents ready. Once everyone's settled in? Robert sketched a quick timeline on the pad. It feels dramatic. Sometimes the truth needs a spotlight. He pushed his glasses up. Your mother made this dramatic when she stole from her grieving daughter. The words hit home. I thought about Lily's purple marker note, about Miranda's dismissal, about all those careful lies Evelyn had built. 4 weeks until the reunion. Perfect timing. Gives us room to arrange everything. Robert started a fresh page. First, I know a jeweler, retired now, but he still does authentication work. Harold Winters, real professional, respected in the community. He'll make your mother's replica look exactly what it is. Cheap tin. I pulled out my phone, checking the reunion date. July 16th. Will he be available? Already spoke to him. He's eager to help. Apparently, he's seen too many family heirlooms vanish into convenient stories. Robert made a neat check mark. We'll have all the documents organized, including his credentials. Everything notarized, everything clear. The plan was taking shape, but something nagged at me. What about Lily? Your daughter's smart. She spotted the necklace first, remember? Robert's eyes crinkled. But you're right, she shouldn't be front row for this. I'll talk to Sarah about keeping the kids busy with those water balloons she always brings. I nodded, grateful. Lily likes Sarah's daughters. Now timing matters. Robert drew a small diagram. We let everyone arrive. Let your mother hold court like usual. Wait for her to really settle in. Then we start with the records. Casual at first, just showing people who ask. Word will spread. Questions will start. And the jeweler? He'll be mingling, just another guest. But once the whispers reach critical mass, Robert made another check mark. That's when he steps up, offers his professional opinion. Very natural, very public. The ticking in my head grew louder, matching the old kitchen clock on Robert's wall. 4 weeks. After 2 years of wearing that replica, of using my grief like a weapon against me, Evelyn's carefully curated image would finally meet daylight. "Run it again," I said, pulling the legal pad closer. "I want to know every step." We spent the next hour rehearsing the sequence. Records first, letting truth ripple through the crowd. Then verification from Harold, impossible to dismiss. Finally, the questions Evelyn wouldn't be able to dodge, not with her audience watching every twitch. Night was settling beyond Robert's kitchen window, painting the glass black while we fine-tuned details. Each point we covered felt like another key clicking into place, locking our plan into something solid, something real. I looked at the timeline we'd built, at the neat check marks marching down the page. For the first time since Lily's purple marker note, I felt steady. Ready. 4 weeks, Robert said, closing his pen with a click. Just enough time to get everything perfect. I touched the empty place at my throat where Mark's real necklace should have been. Perfect is exactly what we need. Pulled into Evelyn's driveway 3 hours before sunset, watching Robert arrange folding chairs in neat rows. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. You know that feeling when you're about to step on stage? When your throat gets dry and your pulse does this weird dance? Yeah, multiply that by about 1,000. "Need help with those chairs?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Each metal snap of a chair locking into place made my heart stutter. "Got it covered," Robert answered, wiping his brow. Ms. Hahn, just texted. She's 15 minutes out." I nodded, scanning the backyard. Same citronella candles, same red checkered tablecloths rippling in the breeze. Amazing how normal everything looked, considering what was about to happen. The documents sat heavy in my bag, each page a loaded gun waiting to fire. "Lily get settled okay?" Robert asked, adjusting another chair. "Sarah picked her up an hour ago. They're having a pizza and movie marathon." I smiled, remembering how easily Sarah had understood. "Sometimes grown-ups need to have difficult conversations," she'd told Lily. "How about we make it a girls' night instead?" The first guests started trickling in around 5. Miranda arrived with her husband, both of them giving me those careful looks people reserve for relatives they think might be unstable. Joel showed up next, making a beeline for the cooler without even a nod in my direction. Then I saw her. Evelyn glided through the gate like she was entering her own coronation. Tidy cardigan, pressed slacks, every hair in place. And there, catching the late afternoon sun, that familiar golden flash at her throat, my throat tightened. How many times had she worn my necklace, that cheap copy, while watching me grieve the original? "Mrs. Carter?" A quiet voice at my elbow. I turned to find a petite woman in a crisp blazer. "I'm Grace Hahn. Harold sends his apologies. He threw his back out yesterday. But I've been handling authentication work for him for 6 years now." I must have looked panicked, because she quickly added, "I brought everything we discussed: loop, portable scale, full documentation kit." She patted her leather case. "And 15 years' experience spotting genuine pieces from replicas." "Thank you for coming," I managed. "The pergola might be a good spot." She nodded, moving casually toward the wooden structure where afternoon shadows were starting to lengthen. Just another guest at just another reunion. Robert caught my eye from across the yard and tipped his chin toward a cluster of cousins. They were already drifting closer, voices frosted with curiosity about the stranger with the leather case. My hand shook slightly as I picked up a glass. One gentle tap with a spoon, and conversations began to hush. I felt every eye turn toward me, including Evelyn's. Her smile hadn't slipped, not yet. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I began, keeping my voice level, "but I need a moment of everyone's time. There's been a family misunderstanding that needs clearing up. I think we all deserve fairness and clarity, don't we?" I moved to the nearest picnic table, where paper napkins fluttered like nervous birds under the salt shakers. The sealed sleeve of documents made a soft sound as I placed it down. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Robert quietly closing the gate. No easy exits now. Mother? I turned to Evelyn, whose smile had acquired a brittle edge. Would you join me here? We have a neutral party who can help us confirm something important. Ms. Hahn stepped forward, her case already open. See, Loop caught a ray of setting sun, sending a brief flash across the gathering crowd. Faces turned from curious to intent as understanding began to dawn. What's this about? Evelyn's voice carried that familiar note of dismissal, but I caught the tiny tremor underneath. It's about truth, Mother. About a necklace, some pawnshop records, and choices you made while I was grieving. I gestured to the documents, then to Ms. Hahn. Shall we begin? Ms. Hahn adjusted her position, angling the necklace toward the fading sunlight. You know that moment when the air gets heavy before a storm? That's what it felt like, watching her work. Everyone had gone statue still, except for the occasional nervous shift of feet on grass or ice cube clicking against plastic. May I? She asked Evelyn, gesturing to the clasp. The politeness in her voice could have cut glass. My mother's fingers twitched toward her throat, but with 30 pairs of eyes on her, what choice did she have? Of course, she said, that society smile still firmly in place, though I don't see the point of this theatrical display. The necklace came free with a tiny click. Ms. Hahn carried it to the picnic table where she'd laid out a black velvet pad. Funny how that color kept showing up in this story, wasn't it? First my box, now this. Through her loop, she studied every millimeter, like she was reading a book. The silence grew thicker than the barbecue smoke drifting over from the Weber kettle someone had forgotten to close. Even the cicadas seemed to be holding their breath. Initial observations, Ms. Hahn began in that calm, professional tone they must teach in jeweler school. The chain shows typical wear patterns for its apparent age. She placed it on a small digital scale. Weight is 12.4 grams, which is significantly lighter than what would be expected for solid gold of this dimension. A few people shifted closer. I caught Cousin Beth's sharp intake of breath. The metal responds to magnetic testing, which genuine gold should not. Ms. Hahn demonstrated with a small tool. The clasp design is consistent with mass production circa 2010-2015. She turned her attention to the pendant. Surface examination reveals plated base metal with considerable wear at contact points. The pendant itself appears to be primarily tin alloy. Someone's plastic cup crumpled, the sound like a gunshot in the thick air. I didn't turn to see who. The markings on the surface are etched, not engraved. Ms. Hahn's voice remained steady. There's no depth consistency or characteristic tool marks that would indicate professional engraving. In my professional opinion, this is a replica piece, likely purchased from the mid-range retail chain. The whispers started like a wave breaking against rocks. I heard, "Oh my God," at least 3 times. Evelyn's face went from pink to white to red in the space of a heartbeat. This is ridiculous. She stood so fast her chair rocked backward. A witch hunt, that's what this is. I won't stand for it. I'll call my attorney. Please do, I said, sliding the plastic sleeve forward. I'm sure they'd be interested in these pawn shop records, the dates, the detailed description, Mark's initials. I tapped each document, all notarized, all verified. Robert? I didn't have to raise my voice. He was already moving, another folder in his hands. Statement from Harold Chen, recently retired manager of Golden Crown Pawn and Jewelry, he announced, laying it beside my documents. Confirms the transaction date, the piece description, and... He paused, making sure everyone could hear. The seller's name and ID verification. Evelyn's eyes darted to Miranda, then Joel. But Miranda was staring at her shoes, and Joel had turned his back completely, shoulders rigid under his polo shirt. No rescue squad coming this time. Would anyone like to examine the documents? I kept my voice gentle, almost kind. They're quite thorough. The pawn ticket even has a notation about the specific font used for Mark's initials. Amazing what details matter in cases like this, isn't it? Cousin Beth stepped forward first, then Aunt Sarah. Soon, A small crowd gathered around the table, passing papers carefully from hand to hand. Each intake of breath, each murmured comment was another brick falling from the wall of Evelyn's carefully built reputation. I had one more document in my bag, the original appraisal with its detailed photos, like the final card in a game that had gone on far too long. Looking at my mother's face, I knew she could sense it coming. "Shall we continue?" I asked, reaching for my bag. I pulled out the documents one by one, laying them on the table like playing cards. Each thump felt heavier than the last in that thick summer air. "Let's start with the pawn ticket." My voice stayed steady, probably steadier than I felt. The scan was crystal clear, that thermal paper somehow preserving every damning detail. Date is March 15th, 3 weeks after Mark's funeral. Remember those casseroles you brought over, Mom? All those helpful visits while I was at work? You could have heard a leaf drop. Even the ice in the coolers seemed to stop crackling. The description's quite specific. I traced the typed lines with my finger. 14K gold chain, pendant with custom engraving, MC in copperplate font. That's Mark's initials, in case anyone's wondering. Same font we used on our wedding invitations. Beth leaned in closer, squinting through her readers. "There's an ID number here." "Yes," Robert cut in smoothly, "which matches perfectly with the chain of custody document." He tapped the notarized form. "Every transfer recorded, every handler verified. The kind of paper trail courts love." I spread out the appraisal next, its photos showing the necklace from every angle. Note the specific wear pattern on the clasp, the tiny nick on the third link. Details matter, don't they, Mom? Evelyn's fingers were white-knuckled on her cardigan. "You have no right. I have every right." The words came out softer than I expected, just like the estate attorney had every right to send this email. I pulled up the message on my phone, turning the screen so everyone could see. "Would you like me to read it?" No one answered, but no one looked away either. "Under State Statute 47.3b, I read, "documented theft from an estate beneficiary, particularly involving items of sentimental value, can void subsequent attempts to alter inheritance terms. Such actions may also trigger additional legal consequences." Fascinating stuff, really. Miranda's face had gone the color of old milk. Joel kept staring at his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. But it was the cousins' expressions that told the real story. Shock melting into something harder as years of Evelyn's perfect family facade crumbled. Robert cleared his throat. "The shop's records show a buyback within days of the original pawn. Their secure retrieval service is still available." He looked directly at Evelyn. "A simple solution, wouldn't you say?" Ms. Hahn had been examining each document with that same professional detachment. Now she straightened, adjusting her glasses. "The documentation certainly aligns with my physical findings. The replica around Mrs. Carter's neck shows typical manufacturing marks for costume jewelry, while these records clearly describe a genuine piece with custom work." The whispers started again, but different now. Sharper, judgmental. I watched decades of carefully cultivated reputation dissolve in the space of heartbeats. Aunt Sarah stepped back from the table, arms crossed. "All those years lecturing us about family loyalty?" "The Christmas cards about setting good examples," Beth added. "Those rules about proper behavior," Cousin Tom muttered. Each comment was another brick falling from Evelyn's wall. She stood there, shoulders rigid, as her own curated audience turned against her. The woman who'd spent my whole life judging others was finally feeling judgment's weight herself. I gathered the documents carefully, sliding them back into their protective sleeve. "The retrieval service is open until 6, I said. "They're very professional, very discreet." The silence stretched like warm taffy. Then Miranda, who'd always been Evelyn's echo, cleared her throat. "Mom," she whispered, "what did you do?" And there it was, the question that changed everything. I watched my mother's perfect mask crack along invisible fault lines as her own daughter's doubt hit home. Joel finally looked up, his face a storm of emotions. "The necklace," he said. "Just give back the real necklace." The collective exhale was like a shift in atmospheric pressure. You could almost hear the last pieces of Evelyn's carefully constructed image hitting the ground around her designer shoes. Ms. Hahn began packing her tools with quiet efficiency. Robert stood steady beside me, a solid presence, against the weight of what we'd just done. And my mother, the woman who'd raised me, betrayed me, and tried to bury her actions under layers of manipulation, stood alone in a circle of truth neither of us could unspeak. Ms. Hahn returned within the hour, a compact box balanced carefully in her gloved hands. You know those moments when time seems to slow down, like honey dripping off a spoon? That's what it felt like watching her set that box on the picnic table. "The shop's retrieval service was quite efficient," she said, her professional tone unchanged, despite the tension crackling through the yard. "I've verified the piece against the original documentation." My hands barely trembled as I reached for the box. Funny how something so small could carry such weight, isn't it? The felt lining whispered against my fingers as I opened it. There, nestled in soft darkness, lay Mark's necklace, the real one. The one he'd chosen with such care, spending weeks comparing chains until he found the perfect match for the pendant. I could almost hear his voice. "See how the links catch the light, Mel? Like little stars." Miss Hahn produced her loupe once more. "If you'll allow me?" She lifted the necklace with practiced care, angling it under her lens. "Yes, here we are. The engraving matches the documentation perfectly. MCL. In copperplate Gothic. Quite distinctive work." I leaned closer, though I didn't need magnification to recognize those letters. I'd traced them countless times during sleepless nights after Mark passed. Each curve and serif was as familiar as my own heartbeat. Robert stepped forward, his quiet presence steadying as always. "Would you like help with the clasp?" But this moment, this one, was mine alone. The gold felt warm against my palms as I lifted it free. The familiar weight settled around my neck like coming home after a long journey. My fingers found the clasp without hesitation. Muscle memory doesn't forget something that precious. A small shadow fell across the table. Lily stood there, her face tilted up like a flower seeking sun. Those eyes, Mark's eyes, studied the necklace with such intensity. Then she reached out, one finger barely brushing the pendant. "Daddy's home. Again," she whispered, and something in my chest both broke and mended in the same breath. Across the yard, Evelyn sank into a folding chair. The replica still hung at her throat, its cheap shine now obvious to everyone. Probably felt like it was burning her skin. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving neck, if you want my honest opinion. The whispers had started again, but different now. Colder, more final. Cousin Beth was already steering her kids toward the gate. Aunt Sarah wouldn't even look in Evelyn's direction. The family she'd spent decades arranging like chess pieces was walking away, leaving her to sit with the consequences of her choices. "The estate attorney will be pleased with the documentation," Robert murmured. "Clean resolution, legally speaking." I nodded, watching Miranda gather her purse while Joel studied the ground. Neither looked at their mother. Some bridges, once burned, stay ashes. A cloud shifted overhead, and afternoon sun caught the pendant. Real gold has a language all its own, warmer than the cheap flash of Evelyn's replica, steadier somehow, like truth itself caught in metal. The light played across the surface like a quiet banner of victory. The paper lanterns Miranda had hung that morning swayed gently in the breeze. Funny how I could suddenly notice small details like that, like my senses had finally cleared after months of swimming through fog. Each breath came easier than the last. I adjusted the pendant, centering it perfectly. The weight felt right, natural, like the period at the end of a long sentence. You ever had a moment you knew you'd remember forever? Not just the facts, but the feel of it? The way the air tasted, the exact shade of the sky? I wanted to bottle this one. Store it next to Mark's laugh and Lily's first steps. The day Justice wore gold and came home to rest against my heart. Looking at Evelyn now, small, silent, stripped of both legal leverage and carefully polished reputation, I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth had done all the shouting necessary. I simply lifted my chin and said what we all knew: betrayal always buries itself.